My name is Rhonda Crowder. I am the current president of Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. We call it GCLEABJ. I grew up here in Cleveland, a small immediate family, the baby of my mother and father's children together. My parents divorced when I was about in the 4th grade, so the majority of my life grew up a single mother, single mom household in the Huff community. Went to Cleveland Public Schools all my life, graduated from John Hay, and probably around 19, 20 years old, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and that's when I realized that I wanted to be a writer. And I decided to go to Cuyahoga Community College to try to figure out how to achieve that career goal. So I graduated from Tri-C Metro campus and went on to Cleveland State, moved out of Cleveland because I thought that I was gonna grow up, leave Cleveland and never come back. That was my plan. But I moved to Atlanta, lived there for a couple of years, and I came back home for Christmas one year because I wanted to spend Christmas with my family and I wanted to see some snow too. And I ended up staying. That was 20 years ago. And eventually got a job at the Call and Post and began to develop this career as a journalist here in this community. And as you mentioned, I do a number of other things, but I always tell people at the core, I'm a writer. Everything always boils back down to me writing something. The family member that inspired me to follow my career path, probably the closest to that, would be my mother's stepbrother. His name is Kenneth Hill. He would love to hear this. But he went to college. I come from a very blue collar, hard-working family, blue collar jobs. My mother worked at a warehouse. My father was a barber. Both of my grandfathers worked at steel mills. But my uncle, Kenneth, was probably the first person I knew that went to college. He went to the University of Cincinnati, and I was very young at the time. So I remember him being away at college, and he would come home and he would take pictures. And so I began to develop this passion for taking pictures. That was like one of my first hobbies as a child. And he would go into the bathroom and create his own makeshift dark room, lab. And he would take pictures and develop pictures. So not necessarily a writer, but I wanted to be like him. He traveled a lot. He moved out to California. So he was the person that I related to the most because he was so adventurous and outgoing and well-spoken, and everybody loved him, and really creative. And so that's probably the family member that inspired me the most. So I've been a part of the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists since its inception in 2013. So there have been different iterations of NABJ chapters here in Cleveland over the years. There was a time where there was no NABJ chapter here. So in 2013, a group of journalists, Harry Boomer and Joe Steels and a number of others, Branson, Wright and Delvis, and there were a number of others, decided that it was time to bring an NABJ chapter back to Cleveland. And so they started spreading the word. And I had always wanted to be a part of NABJ, but we didn't have a local chapter. So when I heard that they were bringing a chapter back and was starting it up, I immediately knew that I wanted to join and be an active member. The mission is to strengthen and serve our community by understanding the past with perspective, reporting the present, and basically cultivating the next generation of Black journalists, providing fellowship for current journalists, and professional development for current journalists. So right now we partner with Advance Ohio, which is the parent company to Plain Dealer and Cleveland.com, and we host a media academy for 8 weeks, generally between January and March. The upcoming will be our 3rd year doing this Media Academy. Cleveland chapter of NABJ, and NABJ as a national organization has had a long time history of programming called Urban Journalism Workshop, where for 8 weeks, students come in on a Saturday, work with professional journalists, learn all about the industry, produce content, produce stories, take pictures, and just really have an opportunity to see what it's like to be a working journalist. And so that has been a long-standing program for NABJ and past NABJ Cleveland chapters. We haven't had the opportunity to really fully bring back Urban Journalism Workshop. So that's why we've been partnering with the Plain Dealer to host this Cleveland Media Academy. And interestingly, Plain Dealer was a big major contributor and sponsor to former Urban Journalism Workshop programs. Our organization is still fairly new. We're about 11 years old now. So we have not been doing a lot of big events to engage the community. We have hosted some, maybe talks or workshops or partnered with other organizations like City Club or Press Club or some things like that. However, we are planning to host the National Association of Black Journalists convention in 2025. That is a convention that attracts upwards 4,000-5,000 Black journalists from across the country. So we have a lot of planned events coming up over the next 12 months. A Hall of Fame induction ceremony. To my understanding, we have never had a Hall of Fame induction ceremony recognizing Black journalists specifically in this community. So we're going to be doing that in February. Then come next August, when the convention is here, we'll be having a Welcome to Cleveland party and other events during convention. And that's going to give our organization the leverage, the catalyst to start doing more in the community, the things that we've been wanting to do, ideas we've been cooking up over the last 10 years. We did this past summer host a golf outing with 100 Black men of Greater Cleveland. When I became a full-time professional journalist in 2005, when I was hired at the Call and Post, there was a NABJ chapter here in Cleveland at the time. And people would always say, you should join NABJ, you should join NABJ. I had never heard of NABJ. So then when I began to look for the chapter to join, it had disbanded. It was gone. So for 10 years of my career, there was no NABJ chapter here. So when I heard about a NABJ chapter reforming here in the Cleveland community, I knew I wanted to be a part of it, not only to connect with other journalists and fellowship with other journalists and get to know other journalists, but really more so to make sure that this organization was around for up-and-coming Black journalists, for college students who are interested in journalism. Because I always imagine, well, what if I knew about NABJ when I was a college student? Because I didn't. And now, especially with becoming more active and involved at the national chapter and seeing what that convention is like every year, I can only imagine what my career might be like today had I connected with NABJ as a college student. And there was a NABJ chapter active here in Cleveland when I was a college student. I was just disconnected. I didn't know about it. And it is also, I think it's important to also note too, that when we had a previous NABJ chapter here, and they were actively doing the Urban Journalism Workshop, which ran for over 20 years, that program produced journalists that went through that program in high school, went away to college, and came back and served as working journalists in this community. It helps me become a better journalist. It helps me connect with other journalists. There's actually been times when I feel like I'm done with journalism. And I went to an NABJ conference and I got that shot in the arm, right, to inspire me to want to keep going. We still have a lot of work to do as an organization because, again, we reinstituted in 2013. So my presidency is only the third administration of this iteration of Cleveland NABJ. So Harry Boomer was our first president. Kevin Chill Hurd was our second president. Now I'm the third. So those first two administrations was really just about getting the organization back up and going, growing membership. Now we're starting to look at how do we sustain the organization? How do we make sure that this organization continue to exist for another 10, 20, 50 years? How do we engage young people, get them interested in journalism at a time when journalism just do not look the same as it did 20 years ago, right? Even the jobs, and that's something that I struggle with. Like, should we be convincing young people to come into this industry? And I was at an event in Cincinnati. Matter of fact, I was going to the Freedom Center in Cincinnati, and they just so happened was having a Cincinnati NABJ event there at the time. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna go in. I'm here. I'm gonna go into the event. And there was some seasoned journalists. One was celebrating 50 years in journalism. And during the Q&A, I asked the question: should we continue to encourage young people to come into this field, into this industry? And that journalist said we should. However, they shouldn't expect to have a 50-year career like a Leon Bibb has had or a Harry Boomer. That type of length in this industry is not going to exist anymore, but it can prepare them for something else. The legacy of our organization is the stories that we tell that will be left behind long after we're gone. I remember times, I was an education reporter for the Call and Post newspaper. And I remember one day I was sitting at my desk and I thought about it. I said, if somebody wanted to know what was going on in education in 2008, and they go to the Cleveland Public Library or whatever and began to search the records, they're gonna find my work. Same thing with radio, TV, right? We are the storytellers. We are the documenters of not only Cleveland's history, but even more importantly, Black history. The first time I saw the rendering for the current design, I was out being a reporter somewhere in the community, and there was a table and I saw this rendering and I was like, oh my God, this thing is beautiful. I want to see this get done. But I grew up in this community. I remember when Martin Luther King Drive was 4 lanes. As kids, we would go down and play in the gardens. And it was I can't remember exactly when, but it was a very long time before I even realized that we had a site dedicated to African Americans. So when I learned that we had a site, when I learned that we had a design, I said, we have to figure out a way to get this built. I want to see this done. So I'm active with the garden. I do as much as I can to help get the word out, raise money, whatever it takes. I'm a Gen Z, so it's on us now. It's on my generation to help get this done.